I'll say this. I think today was a dark day for freedom. I think we really retreated in terms of our free market system, and I think we moved a step closer to a government-run healthcare system, as you've been talking about. So I'm really disturbed by that. And, you know, the big three money savers were not in this bill. There's no medical malpractice reform. There is no high deductible policies. In fact, those are outlawed under this bill, and there's no interstate ability for people to buy insurance out of state. So this is not going to cut costs. In my opinion, it's going to raise costs, and this is the source of this dispute between these audits, Martha. What they're talking, the one audit from the Price Waterhouse said, look, this is going to raise people's health care costs over the next 10 years very significantly and above how high costs would rise without the plan. And this new plan says, well, that's not the case. But here's the interesting part about that second study, the one by the MIT professor. What he said is, look, those costs aren't going to rise to individual policyholders because there's going to be very large taxpayer subsidies. But all that means, Martha, is that instead of the worker paying for it, the taxpayer works for it. So, you know, it comes either out of your left pocket or your right pocket, but it does not dispute the fact that costs will go up to the system over the entire healthcare system, and that's going to mean that it's going to make it much harder for people to afford health insurance in the future. Yeah,
you know, you touched on something interesting, Steve, that I want to go back to for a moment, and that's the question of tort reform and it not being in this bill. And, you know, sort of the understanding of that is because lawyers have huge lobbyist groups. They don't want any of their income to be curtailed by any rules out there that say, well, you know, if somebody takes out the wrong organ, they're supposed to take the left side and they take the right side. We don't want there to be any limit on how much you can sue for that. But it's interesting to me that while that group is protected, the insurance companies are vilified for protecting their turf a bit by having this audit of their own done.
Well, you know, it's very interesting about the trial lawyers, and you make a very good point, Martha. You know who the second largest contributor to the Democratic Party was in 2008? It was the trial lawyers. So this is payback for the trial lawyers. This is supposed to be a bill about reducing costs and shared sacrifice, but the one group that doesn't have to sacrifice here are the trial lawyers who take a big bite of our out of our health care dollars. And, you know, the thing that I find really distressing about this bill, and I want to emphasize this again, about 80 to 85% of Americans already have health insurance, and we know from surveys that 80 to 90% of those people are very satisfied with their health care. So the problem with this bill for the vast majority of Americans is there's no upside to this plan. It's only going to jeopardize the status of their plan as more employers drop their health care plan and push people into the government system, and many people simply won't be able to afford health care because it's going to be more expensive. So I think the Democrats are really playing with fire here because most Americans are pretty happy with the health care they have.
Yeah, and one of the ways they're going to generate revenue is that if you don't buy your own health insurance plan, you're going to be fined, right? Or the companies will be fined.
That's right.
And I find it curious that, you know, when you look at the uninsured, there's a good portion of those uninsured who are young people who think, you know, that they really don't need to be. So are those young people going to, you know, write their $1,000 checks to the government and say, you know, they're going to be conscientious, I guess, about that, but not conscientious about buying maybe a $2,500 insurance plan to start off?
Yeah. You know, this is a very important point, Martha, because the reason that this new health insurance study is basically saying the costs will rise is what they're predicting, and I very much subscribe to this view, is that what will happen is healthy people will opt out. They'll simply pay the fine of $800 or $1,000, which is a lot cheaper than health insurance, and then they'll go into the government system. And what you're going to have over time is the sick people will sign up under the, you know, the guaranteed issuance and the pre-existing conditions, and that's going to lead to higher and higher costs, and that causes a death spiral. And that's why a lot of us think the ultimate end to where this bill goes is eventually we're going to have a single-payer government system because the costs are going to explode. And in fact, they're set up to do that. That's the point. This system that is being set up under the Senate bill is designed to explode costs so that we have to have price controls and we have to have the government take over the health care program, which is something the vast majority of Americans do not want.
All right, Steve.